final thing that I want to touch on in this chapter is the limits of a beneficiary's rights. So if a trustee for whatever reason, breaches their duties, so they don't keep trust accounts, or they use the trust property for their own benefit. So let's say if they, instead of renting a house out at market value under the trust, they let their son live in it for much less than it could have been rented for in the open market, a trustee's probably breached their duty and the beneficiaries have a claim against them. Trustees can, depending on what the trust is and what the clauses of the trust are, trustees might have a right to, sell property or reinvest property. But if they misuse it, or they give it away, or they treat it as genuinely their own without giving the beneficiary the benefit of that, then the beneficiary has a claim personally against the trustee. So they can go after the trustee's own money to try and be compensated for what they've lost. Sometimes it goes further than that, and a beneficiary has a right not just against the trustee, but to get the actual property back that they've lost. So let's say let's go back to Jane and Mary. I liked them. Let's say Jane leaves Mary some valuable jewellery. But let's say Mary is, let's say she's got Down syndrome, and so she needs a lot of help to live an independent life, and the mother doesn't want to leave the jewellery with her directly because somebody might steal it off of her. And so instead, Jane gives it to, let's say, her nephew Henry, so Mary's cousin, to hold this jewellery for Mary. And there's not a whole lot you can do with jewellery. It's not an investment. It's sentimental as well, so it's probably not appropriate for Henry to be selling it and trying to make a profit off of it. It's just a small thing that Henry should be holding on to, and if Mary's got an event that she wants to go to, then he should be letting her wear the jewellery. It's a very simple trust. It's a very straightforward trust. He needs to be looking after the jewellery for Mary's benefit. And maybe, if he's trustee and in his discretion, if Mary genuinely has no money or something bad happens and she needs to raise money to, let's say, see a doctor, then it might be appropriate for Henry to sell the jewellery and raise that money for her. But if Henry instead sells, let's say, a bracelet from that jewellery and keeps the money for himself, he's breached his duty as trustee to use it for Mary's benefit. And Mary, or maybe somebody representing Mary, so a friend or a carer, would bring this case on her behalf. But Mary has the right to, firstly, get the value of the bracelet back from Henry. But of course it might be worth more sentimentally because it was her mother's jewellery. So she might want to try and get the bracelet back. And this is where it gets a bit complicated. So if Henry had just stolen the bracelet from Mary, and he sold it on to someone else, in the UK the law is that Mary can get that bracelet back because Henry never had legal ownership of that bracelet. And it's the general principle, it is in Latin, nemo dat quod non habet, I don't know what the pronunciation is, which is no one can give what they cannot have. Henry doesn't have legal title of the bracelet. If it was his bracelet and he sold it on, then he's transferred legal ownership from himself. He's gotten the cash in return, and he's given the legal ownership to someone else. That's fine. But Henry never had legal ownership because the bracelet was never his. And so when he sells it on, Mary can try and recover. So let's say it was bought by Jenny. Mary can get the bracelet back from Jenny because it's stolen goods. The difficulty with the trust is Henry actually does have legal title, doesn't he? He has the legal ownership. Mary has an equitable ownership to try and make him use it for her benefit. And so the problem is that Henry actually probably did transfer legal ownership to Jenny, and the bracelet is Jenny's. Now, there are exceptions to this. Yeah, and by the way, if he does sell it on to Jenny and Jenny really does own it now, Mary still has a claim against Henry for breaching his trustee duties, and she can get damages for that. But the damages might not be worth much, it's just a sentimental piece of jewellery, it's not worth a huge amount of money. And she can't get her mother's bracelet back. So, but there's circumstances in which actually Mary could get the bracelet back. And that's because Jenny, if she's just a stranger who meets Henry at a market, she sees the bracelet, she likes it, she buys it, she's got no reason to believe Henry doesn't have proper title to it. Jenny is what's called equity's darling, which means equity isn't going to take the bracelet back off of her. Equity's not going to get involved where the law's already said it's hers. And to be equity's darling, so basically it's a trite phrase, it just means equity's favourite. She needs to be a bona fide purchaser, which means she buys it, she doesn't know there's anything wrong with it, and she needs to be a purchaser, which means she buys it for money. If it was a gift, then Mary might be able to get the bracelet back off of her, because she hasn't lost anything, really. At full value, so she needs to have given money for it. And without notice, she can't have a reason to suspect, or if she was told by Henry, oh, this bracelet isn't actually mine, but you can have it, I'll sell it to you anyway, then she's on notice that the bracelet isn't really Henry's, and so equity's not going to help her there, it's going to take the bracelet back. But where this often happens is if a trustee's being a bit naughty and is trying to take control of trust property, what they'll do is they'll try and sell it on to someone else, but it won't be a genuine sale. So if Jenny is actually Henry's really good friend, and Henry doesn't tell her exactly, but Jenny knows that he sort of does this kind of thing where he takes his sister's property and tries to sort of take it away from the court's reach. Jenny she's not without notice, or maybe she's not a real purchaser. And in a circumstance where maybe Jenny and Henry are married and Henry's giving jewellery to his wife, then she's probably not a bona fide purchaser. And so the court's probably going to take the bracelet back off of her and say Mary can have it now. Or a new trustee can take the jewellery off of Henry, including the bracelet. It's probably a more likely scenario. And this happens, it happens quite a lot where you have basically not bona fide purchaser. A bona fide purchaser means someone really has bought it and they really do mean the seller really did mean to transfer legal ownership and the buyer really did mean to take legal ownership. Where you see this quite a lot is like divorce, where in the UK you have to disclose all of your assets to the court so that the court can decide how they're going to divide it up at the end of a marriage if the parties can't agree. And so one of the parties, normally the man, decides to, let's say, sell his car to his friend. The friend hasn't really bought the car. The friend knows he's just holding the car until the end of the divorce proceedings and he's going to sell it back to his friend for a nominal amount. And a court basically says that wasn't a bona fide purchase. That wasn't a purchase in good faith. So we're going to count the car as the husband's asset. Or we're going to make the husband account for the value of... More likely we're going to make the husband account for the value of the car in the divorce. So that's what a bona fide purchaser is. Sometimes it's pronounced bona fide. Since Latin is a dead language, there's no particular way to pronounce it, but in case you hear that as well. So for next time, I want you to do the reading around chapter 5, and we'll talk a bit more about intention, subject and object, and the things that you need to create a trust. See you then.